So if you're a home bartender like myself, and you're wondering if you should always use a jigger when you're measuring ingredients when you're making cocktails at home, then this is the correct video for you. My name is Ron Vierpin. I'm a full-time medical doctor, and I've been a home bartender for over 5 years now. During that time, I've learned how to make over 100 different cocktails, and I've thrown over 50 cocktail parties. And I teach other busy professionals how to make cocktails at home. And in this video, I'm going to be answering that very important question. Should you always use a jigger when you're measuring your ingredients when you're making cocktails at home? And just to really, no fluff, no BS, just to really get into the heart of this matter, the correct answer, in my opinion, is yes. I've been making cocktails, as I mentioned in the intro to this video, for over 5 years now. I've learned over 100, probably somewhere close to 150 different cocktail recipes. I've made thousands of shaken cocktails, thousands of stirred cocktails, thousands of highball cocktails, all across the spectrum. I made tons and tons of cocktails. I made cocktails with gin, vodka, tequila, cognac, whiskey. I've made all kinds of different cocktails that only contain 2 or 3 ingredients, cocktails that contain 4 or 5 ingredients, cocktails that contain 10 plus ingredients, like tiki cocktails. And really across the entire spectrum of all types of cocktails, no matter the core spirit, no matter whether it's shaken or stirred, no matter how many different ingredients in that cocktail, the answer to this question is always going to be yes. You should always measure your ingredients using a jigger and be as accurate and precise as possible when you're making your cocktails at home. And the reason for this is because, bartending, unlike something like cooking, bartending is actually more of a science. It's more about precision, accuracy, and correct measurements. So that way, I think of bartending somewhat similarly to baking. With baking, you always have to have the precise ingredients in order to get the desired result. With cooking, cooking is more of an art as opposed to a science like baking or bartending. Cooking, you can just eyeball your ingredients. You can just say, a couple dashes or a couple pinches of salt or whatever spices you're going to be using. Really, that doesn't really apply as much to cocktails. Once you're more advanced, you can sort of get a feel for the different flavor profiles and how to balance cocktails. But especially when you're a home bartender, as opposed to being a professional bartender, you're not going to be making cocktails as frequently as the professionals are, and you want your cocktails to have some level of consistency. And the best way to get that level of consistency and to always have balanced cocktails is to always measure your drinks and be as precise and accurate as possible. That's why I think the jigger is actually the first bar tool that all home bartenders should buy. Because with that, you can really do everything else. You can measure your ingredients when you're making any type of cocktail, stirred, shaken, build cocktails, and whatever ingredient type, whatever complexity, whatever number of ingredients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The jigger is going to be that most important thing because that allows you to have those consistent pours. So really, if you're interested in home bartending and, you're not quite sure, if you need to always measure your ingredients, I'm going to say that the answer is always going to be yes. I've had some of my friends even come to my parties and they still ask me like, oh, why don't you just eyeball things? Why do you always measure everything? I'm so crazy that I even measure like sodas where, in a lot of recipes, they just call for a lot of these highball cocktails. They'll just say top with soda, 3 to 4 ounces of soda, something like inaccurate like that. But for me, I always want to be as precise as possible because I feel that leads to the most consistent cocktails. So when I'm throwing a party and there's 20, 25 different guests there, and I'm making 50 different palomas, I want the first paloma I make and the 50th paloma I make to taste the exact same. I want that level of consistency across all the different cocktails to make across a given night. And the best way to do that, honestly, is to make sure you go ahead and measure your ingredients. So that's why even this far into my journey, after having learned this many different cocktails and thrown X amount of cocktail parties, all that, I still, to this very day, measure all of my ingredients. So the way you guys see me build my cocktails when I'm making cocktails on this channel, that's the exact same way I do it in real life as well. I always use a jigger and be as precise as possible. And, especially when you're a home bartender, there's a lot of other disadvantages you have. You're not doing this for a living. You're not going to have as much experience. You're not making cocktails every single night. You want your cocktails to be consistent. And the best way to do that really is to measure your ingredients. So, I created this whole sort of long video on this topic, but really just to summarize, if you're interested in home bartending or you're already a home bartender and you're wondering if there's ever going to be a point where you can just free ball or just eyeball your ingredients, just free pour without measuring, in my opinion, the answer is going to be no. No matter how far you are in this journey as a home bartender, you should always measure your ingredients as accurately as possible using a jigger, and that allows you to achieve a level of consistency that you really can't get otherwise. So anyways, that's all the advice I have for today's video. If you found the advice in this video helpful, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I really like to do 2 styles of videos on this channel. The first will be more of a tutorial style video where I show you guys how to make a specific cocktail. And the second style video will be like this one, where I answer questions, share advice, share stories from my own journey, give tips and tricks, do full guides and different things like that, that I hope will help you guys become better home bartenders. Thank you. Cheers.